Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and we're going to go ahead and do my first impressions video on the Sabre since I've actually had some time to get in and fly the thing. Now before going too far, remember that this is the PTU, and there are expected to be bugs, and ideally we're expected to find them. So don't worry when you hear this, the sky isn't falling just yet. Now the Sabre was sold as a fast and nimble next generation fighter, and it lives up fairly well to the fast portion because it travels at 260 meters per second in the SCM mode, 390 in afterburner, and 760 at cruise. Now you may end up hearing that cruise number and think it's pretty low for a fast ship, but other ships ended up getting a significant decrease in this patch as well. Now the problem with this ship isn't that it's slow. The problem is that it doesn't really live up to the nimble portion, at least in the current iteration of the ship that we have to play with today. The ship is very drifty at times, and there's been reports that I can agree with that the pitch and roll movements aren't set up properly, which results in some pretty terrible oversteering, especially with those pitch movements. Now, I would expect it to be pretty agile, but really, it's like a fat Gladius where it actually flies today, and it's almost kind of similar to where the Vanguard was when it first came out. Now, there could be a mass issue that's contributing to this as well, but not seeing how things are done in the background, and even if I did, I'm not sure if I would understand them. I'm not sure if that's something that needs to be looked at as well, but the ship just carries too much of its momentum and doesn't respond the way you would expect it to. Now, another thing that negatively impacts the mobility of the craft is how it performs when it takes a little bit of damage, and I mean a really little bit of damage. If your engine takes a hit or two, you start getting this engine's low message, and you lose a lot of thrust and control, meaning you're basically doing your best Tokyo Drift impression across the map. Now, in the Vandal Swarm footage that you're going to be seeing at some point during this video, you're going to notice that I get a little bit goofy when flying at some point, and that's a direct result of that message popping up. Now, one thing that I think further exasperates the control issues that we've already talked about is the lack of shielding in the rear of the ship. Because it appears at the moment that the Sabre is only supporting, forward-facing shields. So your engines, which you so desperately rely on with this ship, are dangerously unprotected, meaning you have a lot of loss of maneuverability that's almost inevitable to happen. Now, while the shields that are working aren't particularly strong, they do seem to have a good refresh rate. So when they start to take damage, it's not long before you're back up to full strength. If you end up taking sustained fire, though, you're going to be in quite a bit of trouble. You're not going to survive, and I think that really plays into that sit at the edge of battle and harass others and dodge in and out kind of mentality of this ship. You're not meant to be a Hornet sitting in the middle of a massive firefight. And if the way the current working shields are performing today, if that's an indicator of how the ship's going to act when they're all working, I think the ship then fits its intended description and role pretty well. Now, it's because of this that I don't envision this ship taking the crown in Arena Commander, everybody's go-to ship. I think the Super Hornet still has a really good merit there. It just doesn't have the long-term durability and sustainability of the tankier Hornet line. You're absolutely going to be able to perform fairly well with the ship in Arena Commander, but if you're playing it like a Hornet, you're going to be killed by a Hornet. But who knows, though? That may all change when this ship is fully operational, but I don't think it's fast enough to do what the 350 and M50 does, and I don't think it's strong enough to do what the Hornet does. Otherwise, it's just not at either end of the spectrum where we tend to see the ships that win Arena Commander sit in. So there's another issue with this ship that I think makes the lack of agility an even more dangerous issue, and that's the horrible glare that the interior cockpit has on the glass. Not only are you picking up ambient light from planets and terraforming lasers and getting those reflections, but you also get reflections from your Badgers up front on the glass. And I kind of like the idea of seeing the guns firing right next to you, but in conjunction with the severity of the other glares, it ends up being a pseudo-problematic issue. The weaponry on the ship is pretty good, though the stock laser repeaters are best suited to sustained fire versus kind of that alpha strike ability we see with some of the other weapons. In a ship that will end up being agile and maneuverable, I think that's a good fit because you're going to be able to bounce around and kind of strafe around your opponents, but where it sits today, other ships can keep their guns on you as well as you can on them, and you're not durable enough to take that beating. Now, swapping out the gimbaled Badgers for fixed Panthers would be a good solution, especially since you're then going to have your pips lining up pretty well, which are surprisingly far apart from each other right now. But you could also maybe mix in two laser weapons with two ballistics like tarantulas or broadswords, which would be a good kind of mixed solution for this dilemma. Now, once the ship's performing well, I think, the ship with 4 size 3 ballistics is kind of a scary thought. Now, the missiles are sort of hit or miss at the moment, much like we see with just really any other ship, but I do like the animations that CIG's put in with the missile bay doors kind of folding back to show the munitions that are sitting there and waiting. And not only does that give a big boost to the coolness factor, but it also probably plays into the overall stealth of the ship by keeping those IR and EM producers kind of hidden within the internals of the ship. Now, the view from the cockpit when not restricted by the glare is actually pretty good, and I do appreciate that you get the helmet HUD as opposed to having to rely on the ship's HUD like you do in the Vanguard. And it does carry over a lot of the same design elements from the Vanguard, but you can actually read the panels better as they don't appear to be as small or distant as they do on the Sabre's bigger cousin. Overall, this ship needs a lot of work before we're going to have a really good feel for it. But when you consider how fast this thing went from concept to flight ready, it's pretty awesome. It's a nice feat by CIG just to have it where it is today. Now, the ship in its current state does at least show some of the intended design and gameplay performance that we're kind of going to expect to see. And I think that reinforces that it's not a Hornet replacement, and it's not meant to be. It's a different type of ship for a different type of role, and when performing as intended, I think it's going to fit that role very well. So that's going to be it for now. I'm going to keep trying to fly this thing around more, and I'll let you know if these initial perceptions change, though the PTU is being slightly uncooperative with crashing at the moment. But if you have questions about the ship or want other information, please ask. Otherwise, stay tuned for a whole lot more content coming your way soon. I appreciate y'all watching. Have a great day, and take care.